declaration. Nobody wants to go. Like a commonwealth. Because the French were the Moors were the ones that was. There's this thing they call Gitanos, the gypsies.
See, that's exactly what my soldiers
They
did.
were gypsies. And those are the Moors. They came to cover the north part of Spain. Sexual guys. And one the French language, the Spaniards, it's right here. It's pretty cool. It's interesting.
That makes me
Yeah, I'm happy for you. So did you go?
No, it's just the one rezoning.
I'd like to be fast.
Yeah.
Fast so I can get out of here.
Or take a whole day.
Or take a whole day.
You got nothing else. Oh, sorry.
Boy, woman, there you go.
John Fisher, right?
Yes, sir.
You got it right.
Yeah, no. Me, I'm Pepe Castro.
That's, oh, yeah. It's gonna take me a year, right?
Well, I know.
It's because I'm old. Oh, I don't know, I just made it up.
It's probably been close to a year.
Nah, it's not. I don't think it's that.
Close to.
Think it is? Well, I missed the phone, I know that.
That's new.
And it does explain and force maybe turn on, get reached out to. And there's something about this show or something. She turned
morning, sir. How are you doing? All right, good question. The weather?
Yeah, I feel like, hey, well, it's nice to see them, him in the academy, what a training, most of those students, and being some trainers. That would have been cool. Yeah, that's really.
Hey, buddy, I'm gonna ask them.
Lot widths or lot records?
So we got the packet all put together. Use lots, existing land uses. We got place. So I'm gonna ask them to set them here on the record. It just shows all the commercial and stores and all this stuff. It's around each one of the properties. Usually it's supposed to be part of the price somehow, you know. But this was always in the state, she's on vacation, so.
Really?
So that's fine. Take care of it. But, yeah, we went with them on these.
Well, that might be the same thing for the planning board. I'm sure.
No.
Juan, have you waded into the North End application yet?
Yeah, I'm gonna, let me, Forrest is reviewing my comments right now.
Well, and I know she sent it to him saying, hey, this is what we need to get done.
Hey, sir, how are you doing?
See you.
Okay.
Yeah, you got all the paperwork, I mean, that's all the stuff. All the historical place, all the
Well,
the owners are aware of this, asking for a big shift of activities in the North End.
Wayne and Garrett are really. And then Michael still needs one more.
We just understand that.
Business.
We have, I mean, half what people tell me, but.
We may have to check something that official
Yeah.
framework, you know, there's.
They got that for you.
Don't need to hear that.
I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
like, ultimately, like I always tell everybody, ultimately, because more companies say they vote on it. What I say is just what I can see as the application.
You do what you do.
If they choose to go
I'm
in
sure
a
the
different
weather-
direction, and then it goes to BDO, and they say, yeah, I don't know what about it, well, so be it. I mean, I'm just,
This
the
one
same
is on
with these workers.
And then three.
I think I'm not, this is how much impact, because they will have to take one of the I mean, I like it, because I don't think anybody should be able to have a second property, but there's a lot of so once somebody like that, it doesn't matter what I think, ultimately to those guys down there, those guys up there, they say, you met all the requirements, then you met all the requirements.
Well, they know well, I told these guys, they asked what did I think, I said, it's gonna be a cat fight. I'll tell you right now, it's gonna be a cat fight, because it's altering and changing the way, well, yeah, but our good friend Kim, he got you. You can't work him out, he handles things like that. We don't wanna do anything like he did.
I just,
basically LCT, to show that they were the maximum they can be at.
Now, what it is, it's always double your lot width.
Yeah, it was voting.
Two houses on a lot, 100 feet. So as many feet your side setback for each one, so they give 20 feet. So now we're saying you don't have to only match it up to 15. Yeah, you go 15 to stop that.
Good, because
So it's helping.
that's a good one.
We gotta write that down. That don't happen all the time.
Hold on now, hold on.
So what happens is you have 250 foot lot, 150 foot lot on each one, that's saying you'd have the house 30 feet apart.
Yeah.
Right.
Mine's 425 feet.
Well, the max would be 15.
All right, so we get this party started?
Yeah.
Okay, there, so 15. The max you'd ever have would be 30.
Yeah.
We're just cutting it down to 15.
Okay, good. Well,
Right.
No, we got 4 of us, is 4 enough?
Yep.
This could go fast.
Yeah.
say we vote due to Wayne's delinquents, we will reconvene next month. This room right here.
Who's the chairman?
Lucky you, it's me, Tim Pyle.
Easy name to remember.
Yeah.
You're always.
All right, this meeting of the Escambia County Planning Board for June 5th is hereby called to order with 5 of us, 5 members, representing quorum. Thank you. Reminder to turn off your phones, mine included, vibrate. And if we would, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Staff, we approve the publication and waiver of reading of the legal advertisement. Oh, that's what the topic is. Do we approve of publication?
Yes, sir.
Did the publication meet all the legal requirements?
Yes, sir.
Chair will entertain a motion to waive the reading of legal advertisement.
Second. We're ready to get this one done.
The motion is submitted and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes with all members in favor and no members opposed. Rezoning meeting minutes from the previous meeting have been provided to the board member. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? None being heard, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the rezoning meetings into evidence.
Seconded.
Motion was moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Let's see, the rezoning hearing package for June 5th with findings of fact has been provided to the board members. Chair will entertain a motion to accept the rezoning hearing package with findings of fact and the legal advertising into evidence. Do we have a motion? So moved. Second.
Second.
Motion was submitted and it was made and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion passes with all members in favor. The rezoning hearing package with findings of facts and the legal advertisement will be marked and included in the record for all of today's cases. Sir, will you please swear in the staff? The court reporter, please swear the members of the staff in.
Everybody raise your hand, right hand. You solemnly swear or will affirm the testimony about to give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes. The board has been previously qualified to offer expert testimony in the area of land use and planning. Does anyone have any questions regarding his or her or their qualifications and ability to offer expert testimony? None being heard. Today's agenda, we have, I believe, one item in rezoning.
planning board is acting under its authority to hear and make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on rezoning applications. These hearings are quasi-judicial in nature. Quasi-judicial hearings are like evidentiary hearings in a court of law, however less formal. All testimony will be given under oath, and anyone testifying before the planning board may be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits that the planning board considers will be entered into evidence made part of the record. Opinion testimony will be limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence in the record. Before making the decision, the planning board will consider the relevant testimony, the exhibits entered into evidence, and the applicable law. Each individual who wishes to address the planning board must complete a speaker request form and submit it to the planning board clerk, these pink forms. These forms are at the table in the back of the boardroom. You'll not be allowed to speak until we receive a completed form. Please note that only those individuals who are present and give testimony on the record at this hearing before the planning board will be allowed to speak at the subsequent hearing before the Board of County Commissioners. No new evidence can be presented at the BCC meeting, therefore all testimony and evidence must be presented today. The planning board will provide a recommendation for each rezoning request to the Board of County Commissioners, which will review testimony, documents, and exhibits, consider the closing arguments, and make a final decision. All decisions by the BCC are final. Anyone who wishes to seek judicial review of the decision of the BCC must do so in a court of competent jurisdiction within 30 days of the date the BCC approves or rejects the recommended order of the planning board. All written or oral communications outside of this hearing with the members of the planning board regarding matters under consideration today are considered ex parte communications. Ex parte communications are presumed prejudicial under Florida law and must be disclosed as provided in BCC Resolution number 96-13. As each case is heard, the chair will ask that any board member who have been involved in any ex parte communication please identify themselves and describe the communications. I guess we can start down at the end here and ask if...
No to all.
And no to all?
Myself, no to all as well.
No to all.
And at all.
As required by Section 2-7.2 of the Escambia County Land Development Code, the Planning Board's recommendation to the BCC shall include consideration of the following 6 approval conditions. The approval condition, the applicant has the burden of presenting competent, substantial evidence to the reviewing board establishing that the requested zoning district would contribute to or result in a logical and orderly development pattern. The appropriate surrounding area within which uses and conditions must be considered may vary with those uses and conditions and is not necessarily the same area required for mail notification. A logical and orderly pattern shall require demonstration of each of the following conditions. A, consistent with comprehensive plan. The proposed zoning is consistent with the future land use category as described in the LDC Chapter 3 and with all other applicable goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. If the rezoning is required to properly enact a proposed FLU map and amendment transmitted for state agency review, the proposed zoning is consistent with the proposed FLU and conditional to its adoption. B, consistent with zoning district provisions. The proposed zoning is consistent with the purpose and intent and with any other zoning establishment provisions prescribed by the proposed district and chapter. Compatibility with surroundings. All of the permitted uses of the proposed zoning, not just those anticipated by the rezoning applicant, are compatible as defined in Chapter 6 with the surrounding uses. The uses of any surrounding undeveloped land shall be considered in the permitted uses of the applicable district. Compatibility is not considered with potential conditional uses or with any non-conforming or unapproved uses. Also, in establishing the compatibility of residential use, there is no additional burden to demonstrate the compatibility of specific residences or activities protected by fair housing law. Excuse me. Appropriate if spot zoning. Where the proposed zoning would establish or reinforce a condition of spot zoning as defined in Chapter 6, the isolated district would nevertheless be transitional in character between the adjoining districts, or the differences with those districts would be minor or sufficiently limited. The extent of these mitigating characteristics or conditions demonstrates an appropriate site-specific balancing of interests between the isolated district and adjoining lands. E, appropriate with changed or changing conditions. If the land uses or development conditions within the area surrounding the property of rezoning have changed, the changes are to such a degree and character that it is in the public interest to allow new uses, density, or intensity in the area through rezoning, and the permitted uses of the proposed district are appropriate and not premature for the area or likely to create or contribute to sprawl. At the beginning of each case, as long as there are no objections from the applicant, we will allow staff to briefly present the location and zoning maps and photos for the property. Next, we'll hear from the applicant and any witnesses that he or she may wish to call. Then we will hear from the staff and any witnesses they may wish to call. Finally, we will hear from members of the public who have filed a speaker request form. There's one case to be heard today. And I believe the first rezoning application for case is Z-2018-06. And this is a request to change from HDMU to HCLI-NA. And we've already asked about them to board if there's been any ex parte, a little out of sequence, sorry about that, but, and I've asked if you've also visited the property, whichever would answer to. Staff, was notice of the hearing sent to all interested parties?
Yes, sir.
Was notice of the hearing posted on the subject property?
Yes, sir.
Staff, as long as Ms. Page doesn't mind, should present the maps and photographs for this case.
Good morning, board members. Juan Limos Development Services Planner. Again, this is rezoning case 2018-06 from HDMU to HCLI-NA. This is the location, the general location map for the parcel, which if you're familiar with this area is just right across the street on the east side of Palafox. This is 500-foot zoning for the property and the surrounding properties. The future land use map for the parcel is currently commercial. And while I'm at this map, I will ask, this map was not included on the packet like it usually is. We always do the existing land uses. We just didn't get a chance to include this map, so I will ask that the board approve us to add these as part of the legal packet to go forward with this rezoning. This is the existing land use for the property and the surrounding properties. This is the area photograph of the site in question. And this parcel is located under the Palafox community redevelopment area. This is a public hearing place on site. This is looking north across Herman Street from the subject property. This is looking towards the northeast, again from Herman Street. Looking northeast onto Herman Street. Looking northwest across from Herman Street. Looking towards the southeast from Herman Street onto the actual property. Looking southeast from Herman Street onto the actual property again. Looking the southeast towards the main building entrance of Herman Street for the property. And looking southwest from Herman Street towards the Palafox intersection. Looking southwest onto Herman Street. And that concludes the photographs and maps for the rezoning case.
And for the additional map, do we need to recognize that we've?
Yes, sir, if you would, please.
Is there any objection from the board?
No, do we need to make a motion, Juan, or we just need to recognize it?
You can make a motion to accept it.
But here, I have a motion to accept that extra map into the package presented.
Yeah, do we need a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. So that's fine. Yeah, yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, can we look back at the, let's go back a couple slides if we can, please. I'll tell you when to stop, if you can. I'm sorry, go forward, I'm sorry, I didn't know where we were in the place. I'm right here. So, can we talk about that, the mixed use, I guess this is suburban, it's right adjacent? And how this is in a,
Can you show me the, and I'm gonna move you off
It's
of
the
this
parcel
map for a
just-
second. Can you
yeah.
show us the existing land use map, please?
Oh.
it's the church,
Correct.
I suppose.
Yes, it is. And if you're gonna ask me how did we end up with that mixed use urban?
I don't know who did it, but I mean.
Let me see the zoning district again, let's get that, please.
So it's a split parcel.
So I am going to only assumed that when we did the change, when we adopted the new zoning district, because it was a split zoning parcel, that went with the mixed use, future land use category, because it was a mixed use future land use category. See, that's a good question. It has been there, so I'm going to assume because it's a church, that they never really wanted to make that compatible with the existing zoning districts underneath, or make the zoning districts compatible with the future land use designation for that parcel.
It stood out, so I thought I would ask. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because we were able to get clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Page, come forward. Please swear in, Mr. Brady Page.
I do.
Please state your full name and address for the record.
Mr. Chairman, Buddy Page, Professional Growth Management Services, 5337 Hamilton Lane in Pace.
And have you received a copy of the rezoning hearing package with the findings of fact?
Yes.
And you understand that you have the burden of providing by substantial competent evidence that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan, further the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan, and is not in conflict with any portion of the county's land development code.
I do.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Planning Board, the request before you this morning is an effort to try to correct the zoning categories that were established in this area some time back that always seem to go around this particular piece of property and limit it to a different category than what it actually was being used for. By way of background, the Ward Property and Ward Construction Company, they built this building in 1966, and they've been continuously occupying that building and using it for their construction activities since that period of time. Mr. Ward has retired, has a buyer that's interested in buying it. It was only at that point that he decided to try to correct always being left out and not included in the line of heavy industrial or heavy commercial and light industrial. So we're trying to correct that, Mr. Chairman, here before you this morning. In terms of the consistency with the rules and regulations that have just been displayed, Mr. Chairman, the criteria A and B, we find that the staff finds that we are consistent with that. I would note, though, under criteria B, several items in terms of the findings says the proposed amendment could be consistent with the Land Development Code. And it goes on to say that the applicant had not provided a compatibility analysis addressing the locational criteria. We felt like in looking at the uses all the way around the property, with the exception of the church, that it's been compatible since 1966. And also as far as a locational criteria, it now faces a roadway which basically, once you drive into the property on Herman and you get to the end of the Ward property, everything from there to the reclaimed property to the rear, that EPA wound up giving to the Corps of Engineers, that wound up giving it to Escambia County. That roadway is no longer a residential roadway at all. It's the only way in and out for Mr. Ward to his piece of property, and has been since 1966. In terms of compatibility, still on criteria B, I would direct your attention to criteria C, which says compatibility with surrounding uses, when the findings of the staff in the very first sentence says that the proposed amendment is compatible with surrounding uses in the area. And appropriate for spot zoning, the staff indicates that the district could be brought into an existing use in conformance with the Land Development Code with this action this morning, and we certainly, Mr. Chairman, would concur with that. And finally, criteria E, appropriate with changed or changing conditions. This area, for those of us that have lived in Pensacola just about all of our lives, this has been an industrial area, is today and probably will be for the foreseeable future. Not only is this site heavy commercial and light industrial, but if you look right to the north of it, there is an operation there that grinds countertops for kitchens and what have you. Fairly heavy operation, especially with the trucks that bring in the marble and the granite and so forth across the street. So it is appropriate, Mr. Chairman, that we ask for the board's consideration to change this. It's always been overlooked and omitted from the maps to make it correct and consistent. We'd ask for the planning board's consideration in that request, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Staff's presentation.
Again, Juan Limos, Development Services Planner. On the criteria made for the findings, the proposed amendment to HCLI NA is consistent with the intent and purpose of the future land use category commercial as stated in Comprehensive Plan Policy Future Land Use 1.3.1. The comprehensive plan allows for professional offices, light industrial, recreation facilities, and public and civic. The parcel will utilize the existing public road, utilities, and infrastructure. On the criterion B, the proposed amendment could be consistent with the intent and purpose of the Land Development Code. Staff realizes that the parcel is located on a local road and does not meet the locational criteria as stated in LDC 3-2.11E. However, this is an existing commercial operation, and observing the area, there are other commercial operations in the immediate vicinity, see the map provided by the applicant, as well as some vacant parcels. The applicant has not provided a compatibility analysis addressing the locational criteria. Although there are no plans at this time, the county is in discussion for a future master plan in this area. The parcel is located in the Palafox overlay that have building and setback requirements that will need to be addressed at the time of any future development. C comments provided by CRA Department. The Transportation and Traffic Operations Department has provided a letter stating that there is no ongoing projects in the area. Criterion C, the proposed amendment is compatible with the surrounding existing uses in the area. Within the 500-foot radius impact area, staff observed properties with some districts HDMU and HCLI. Within the parcel area, there is a church, commercial business, and the majority of parcels within the 500-foot impact area are owned by Escambia County and currently listed by the property appraiser as vacant residential. The change to HCLI will be compatible with existing and proposed uses in this commercial area. Any new development will go through the site plan review process and must meet all LDC requirements for buffering, setbacks, access, and stormwater, as well as other code requirements that may apply. Under criterion D, the request to rezone to HCLI district will bring the existing use into conformance with the LDC and the majority of the area, which will shift from the transitional residential to commercial in character with a future proposal of a master plan. Under criterion E, the land uses or development conditions within the area surrounding the property have changed. The parcel was originally a platted residential subdivision. The county is now in possession of the vacant parcels and is pursuing a commercial master plan for the area. And that concludes the staff findings.
Very good. We have one speaker, Mr. Larry Downs. Would you like to come up?
Yes. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear testimony about to give in this case will be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. State your name and your address, please, for the record.
Larry Downs Jr., 12156, Hadberg Drive, Pensacola, Florida. I want to encourage y'all as a citizen of this county to approve this land use coding from the HDMU to the HCLI. From what I understand, it didn't even used to be HCLI until like 2014 or 2015 when y'all rezoned many areas. I believe if the wards hadn't have been busy trying to make a living and work around all this government overreach, they would have been up here and they would have received HCLI. They had made their case and said, hey, we've been in an industrial area since 1967 or whatever it is. And I believe at that time it would have been granted to them. But because they're busy, like everybody else, they just get mapped over with whatever y'all deem to be appropriate use of people's property. So, in light of that, and I'm bringing that to y'all's attention because I believe y'all understand that. Y'all understand that they would have had this. It would have already been granted to them, they would have never been without it. And now that they're, ready to retire, that's part of their retirement. In the private sector, that's what you get. You don't get pensions like government employees do. Your retirement is what you've created, what you've built, despite of government overreach. So if y'all deny them their correct use of their property, you're basically denying them part of their retirement, if not all of it. And that's wrong. It's against the 14th Amendment. And other surrounding properties have the same use. Don't deny these people their rights. Thank you.
Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant, staff, or any other members of the public? Anything further from staff? Mr. Page? No, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval.
No, I'll second that motion.
Have a recommendation and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. The rezoning is approved.
Did we need to address the possible, it may, I think it was section B that said that it may be consistent? Did we need to, I'm looking towards, I guess, the lawyer. Do we need to say anything about it? I mean, it basically says it would be consistent, but then goes in and says, as we're redeveloping it, so does that need to be addressed at all?
Sure, briefly, my understanding is that for Mr. Lemos, the could be consistent would occur at the time of the development review process. An applicant is able to show, in the event they do not meet the locational criteria, there are a number of factors that if they can show they meet those or are otherwise compatible, then the planning director can issue a development order. So if that's not correct, I would ask Mr. Lemos to interject, but I believe that's the intent of the statement, and that would be what the code allows.
I think with our passing of it without any opposition speaks to the point, I would assume that the church may be present or somebody else if they were opposed to it, but apparently they're not. I think that kind of addresses it.
Okay. I just want to make sure it didn't come back and bite us later on.
Sure, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I also assume that the church hasn't had an issue with the operation that's continued since, 1960 something. Churches operate usually 1 day to 2 days a week. If there's not been a major interference, there's not been a major, the market hasn't derived any issues, then I think that these are going to be compatible together.
All right, and with that, we will adjourn the quasi-judicial meeting. We'll call, go ahead and move on and start with the meeting of the Escambia County Planning Board. The regular planning board for June 5th is hereby called to order. With 5 members present, we have a quorum. Do we have proof of publication for this meeting as well?
Yes, sir.
Did the publication meet all the legal requirements?
Yes, sir.
The chair will entertain a motion to waive the reading of the legal advertisement. So moved. Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion passes. Planning board meeting minutes for the prior meeting has previously been provided to the board members. Chair will entertain a motion to accept the planning board meetings into evidence. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. This motion passes as well with all 5 members in agreement. Planning board hearing package for the date today, June 5th, has previously been provided to the board members. The chair will entertain a motion to accept the planning board hearing package into legal advertisement into evidence.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, we're good to go. The first is recommendation of planning board. Let's see, where are we? public hearing concerning the review of an ordinance amending chapter 3 zoning regulations. Staff, go right ahead.
John Fisher, Senior Planner. What we have in front of you today is an ordinance to change the language for the distance between dwelling units. This is to allow for more of a flexible on your site plans when trying to process or construct your homes. We have some site plans that come in every once in a while. We just kind of back up actually. Our current language says double the side setbacks. So if you have 250-foot wide lots, that's 30 feet in between your structures. So what we're trying to do is basically when someone splits a lot up, or they want to put two structures on a lot, it's more the simplest way to say it. So you have a 300-foot wide lot, and between each structure, there would have to be 15 feet on each side, creating 30 feet. What we're trying to do is put a maximum on that, saying you do not have to exceed 15 feet, which would also be consistent with the rest of the land development code, because we have exceed 15 feet through every zoning category, to not allow any extensive more setback between the dwelling units.
This is kind of to curtail the horse trading, right? I mean, if a developer comes in, he's gonna, okay, I know I need this much, but what I'll do is I'll make it up on this end, and it's a kind of a constant back and forth, if I'm not mistaken.
A little bit. We've had a site plan come in with multiple, like, let's say duplexes, and there's some trees that are in the way, and then the developer has to say, all right, we are limited to, all right, 100 feet is our road frontage, so that's 10 feet on each side of each structure that you have to have, so that's saying 20 feet between each structure. So what we're trying to limit it to is 15, for they can have more flexibility. If there's a tree in the way, now they can move that building a little closer to allow that tree there. It also, again, makes it more consistent with the rest of the land development code, because in all our site of the buildings, our side setback is 15 feet max throughout the land development code. And it's just coming consistent, because right now, the current language would say 30 feet if you actually had 150-foot wide lot, because that'd be 15 times 2, which gives you a 30-foot setback in between buildings.
So in essence, it gives you guys more flexibility as well as the...
As the developer, yes, it's helping them out. It's just a minor little change that we've seen a couple incidents where, you know, well, they're going to cut down a tree or, you know, and such, and this is just makes it more consistent with the code.
Any questions?
Well, I just thought this would have been a great opportunity for a visual to aid the board in really grasping what your impact would have been, or maybe a quick visual representation of an example, or maybe using SketchUp or something like that to show this is the, you know, this is the impact of what we're talking about today. Would have been kind of nice.
Yeah, I wish I had a site plan that, you know, we had a couple of site plans that came through recently about this kind of discussion that kind of brought this to our attention. Again, they were trying to put 4 duplexes on a property that was 100 feet wide, so they had to put 10 is their side setback, because it's 100 feet, it's 10% of the 100 feet, so it's 10 feet, and you have to double that between units if you're putting more than one unit. So that made it 20 feet. So we're just trying to max it out at 15, where, and all through our code, our side setback is a max of 15 no matter where you go, and this just helps them also. They want more space, they can create more space. That's up to the developer. Yeah. But this also, I mean, 30 feet, you know, that would have been the max that we would have ever allowed would have been 30 feet. And that's just in a couple incidents we've seen, it's came out to that, like, well, there's no reason to have 30 feet between buildings.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I don't have cold feet on what we're talking about today. I just felt like it could have been a nice thing to have an accompaniment of an illustration for us.
I agree.
To show impact, or here's an example of what it would look like if we couldn't move this way, and here's the more sensible, this is what it looks like when we're able to actually do the reasonable distances between. Again, I don't have cold feet about it. I just would love to see something like that coming to us. Thank you, guys.
And we'll move forward next time with plans and illustrations.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate it. I think they do wonders for it.
No, most
definitely
definitely.
makes sense here.
Any other questions?
I read through this thing, I had to read through it like 3 or 4 times the language. I don't think, to me, it's just not very clear. That's my opinion. Again, I had to read through it 3 times. I asked some folks at work to read it and see if it made sense to them.
Yeah, I have had the pleasure of, not while on this board, but going before these fine folks and asking for, your objective as a developer is get a permit, period. And where reality meets the paper, is very rarely are there not some, there's a lot of horse trading, there's a lot of give and take. Come on, I know I need 20 feet, but look, I'll make it up in this area. And there's a bit of latitude given the county that overall the math works out, because they don't want to get burned by it by somebody saying, hey, and this, I think, just cleans it up. And I mean, I read over it quite a bit, and I was assuming there'd be some folks here to fuss about it, and they're really, I don't think it's as big of a deal as, I was thinking, oh boy, people are gonna be mad about it. Quite frankly, it lets them do their job, and, in my opinion, again.
And Mr. Engwell, thank you for that, Chairman. What is not clear, because we want you to understand what you think is not clear, so we could have some discussions on it.
No, after the discussion, I understand it, but I think it could be simplified. It's.
This is part of,
If less than, basically what you're saying is the distance between dwellings, there's no requirement to be greater than 15 feet.
correct.
That's,
Okay, so,
I just think it can be simplified.
yeah, sometimes people get into these big arguments over why we have an 8-foot, why we have a 7-foot, and there's absolutely zero data to support why they've chosen the 8 versus the 7. And sometimes we just say, you know what, we made a gradient scale, and at this gradient scale it came out to being, we wanted it to cinch down a little bit for the tighter, and so there's been no light study, there's been no air study, there's been no, we do know that fire code needs to be, 5 and 5. We do know those things for facts. But sometimes we pick these distances because on a gradient scale, that this land use gets this many and this land use gets that many, and somewhere in the middle, you need to find the middle guys. And the fact is, it makes sense to me that we don't need to be grossly expanding just to create, a lack of density when the zoning category that what we need to do says something different. So I think this makes rubber meeting the road, making sense moment. But it would have been very handy to have, let's have 6 pieces of paper on the thing and then move them closer and show that this is actually more sensible.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
My point is, I think the best piece of evidence was, hey, you want it consistent with the rest of the code.
So that is it.
Yeah.
So what does the rest of the code say?
Well, that's what I was gonna try to elaborate on. It makes it kind of confusing because this is the beginning of chapter 3, and as you go through each zoning district, it's gotta say your front and side setbacks, what each is. So then you would go to that, all right, my side setback is 10% of my lot width for most of the zoning categories. So if you have 100 feet, just for instance, then you're looking at, 10 feet. So you have to, it's one of these sections you have to read a little further, what's my zoning, then that applies to that. So it might be more confusing because it's just a paragraph at the beginning talking about distance between dwellings. But if you go to your zoning category, then you can figure out, where you're at. It's one of these sections you have to know your zoning is before you move forward.
Yeah, and to me, my biggest beef years ago, a long time ago, I would state that as, if Mr. Downs said he came into the planning, I'm gonna build a house on my lot. Walk in the door and ask somebody, can you please provide me, what I need to do to get a permit for that? And if he got a call for his business and had to go out and came back and saw another person and asked for the exact same thing, I promise you would have gotten 2 different documents. 2 totally different items, different expectations. So anytime they're trying to get consistency, I'm like, yes. That's because of the years of layers of stuff that we put on this. This is hopefully trying to clean it up. And you're right. The beginning explains, well, it's been kind of like this, but we'd like to clean it up. And there's a lot of explanation, which is why I thought there'd be a bit more hullabaloo about it. But again, just my opinion. It's an effort to clean up and be consistent.
And again, I'm not uncomfortable with the 15, you know, I think the only time that we get into any trouble is when we actually exceed what the building code would say, which is the 5, and that's, and then you can still do it, go down to Aragon, and then just basically build a building with no windows on one side. That's all how you achieve, that's how you achieve the 5. But I mean, and again, the 15's not a big, it's a big number. I mean, why would we're not worried? I mean, I'm not worried, it's a big number, in my opinion, so.
All right, we have, leaves in public, let's see, this is, under, let's see, 5A. Yeah, under 5A, I have Mr. Downs, I believe, come on forward.
Well, not Larry Downs Jr., 12156 Hadberg Drive. Not often I get to ask y'all to vote yes. I mostly want y'all to vote no, no, no. This one here, please vote yes. It's a simple one. It's very simple. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other discussion or questions from the board members, entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept this. I think this is sensible and it cleans things up, and I think it's a movement in the right direction. It's not perfection, but it's definitely progress.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. We are going forward with the recommendation. Next, we have B, the public hearing concerning the review of an ordinance amending the Design Standards Manual, Chapter 1, and Land Development Code, Chapter 6, definitions. County, if you'd like to address. Back up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, appreciate this. My name is Colby Brown. I'm Deputy Director for Public Works. Last time we met, we brought before you these recommended changes that you see. One that was a matter of concern was the matter of the Lime Rock base. We had some discussion about the county engineer and her concern about some separation between the base and the water table and some other issues that were brought up. And at that point, the board had asked staff to go back and work that through, make sure everybody was on the same page. We've done that. We met back with the professional advisory committee, also with the county engineer, and what we brought forward before you is what everybody has reviewed and agreed upon. So, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have one, and it was back on the, regarding the wet ponds and stabilization. It's just, in my mind, semantics on number 2. It states that all pond embankments should be designed to have an impermeable clay core of sufficient width and stability and be keyed in below the pond bottom according to geotechnical recommendations. My question was fairly simple, are those recommendations by the applicant or by the county? Meaning, if I had a project, would I have to have employed a geotechnical engineer to say, hey, this will be at this slope, or would it be somebody in the county stating that how they've designed it is adequate?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's typically based on the applicant. In just about every subdivision, we have requirements for geotechnical work that's done, whether it's roadways to determine water table and for ponds as well, for the pond design. So this is part of that design, so the geotech will make those recommendations.
So you'd have to have a geotechnical engineer, I guess, if I submitted these plans, somebody stamping off on them with their livelihood stating this will work, if it's a 3-to-1 slope, 6-to-1 slope, whatever it is.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. No other questions, unless you all do. I remember talking about this at length last night, beating you up pretty good about I think the rock. And again, this is all from the PAC, right? The Professional Advisory Committee that's come forward with this.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, this board made a good recommendation. We kind of tried to jump in the middle and make some changes, and you guys wisely said, no, let's hold off and let's send this back with the PAC, take a look at it, talk with the county engineer, talk with the development community, and we've done all that. So that was a good direction, Joe. So appreciate that. So what you have before you is what they recommended.
Very good. Any other discussion? Staff? Nothing? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve
Yeah.
Second.
And based on the good work by staff and that group, I will also second it.
Having a motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So recommendation goes forward as well to the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Jim, appreciate that.
Thank you. Next, we have a public hearing concerning the review of an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Development and Compliance Review, Article 5, Subdivisions, Section 2-5.3, Minor Subdivisions, and amending Chapter 5, Development Standards, Article 3, Division of Land, Section 5-3.2, General Provisions. That the board review and recommend to the Board of County Commissioners for adoption an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 2, Development and Compliance Review of Minor Subdivisions, and Chapter 5, Development Standards, to modify provisions governing subdivisions and the division of land within the county. Staff, it's yours.
All right. Thank you, Chair. John Fisher again, Senior Planner. And I've just got to refer a little bit, maybe if we have any other specific questions that's come up. Gregory Vicker is also one of the lead planners on putting this together. Again, this is a background just to clarify the splitting of lots between a minor subdivision, what the starting point is. We did not have that clearly identified in our land development code. The wording was parcel. So now we're using the term lot of record. And that way we know when we're doing a lot split to keep minor subdivisions from moving forward from any starting point or splitting a lot, we have to use from the 1996 lot of record. That will be the starting point until the lot of record date would change sometime in the near future, which is stated in the definitions of Chapter 6.
Mr. Chair, if I may ask a question to the station, did you have any former plats that were historical plats previous to the 1960s that were then abandoned, that might be brought up again? Sorry, from the 60s when we were doing the big expansion before, did we do anything?
There is a possibility that there are very, before we even had started doing first this was called unplatted subdivision, then they switched to minor. Before we even started doing any of those, there was some subdivisions that were basically partially created, then we adopted zoning, the preliminary plats were approved, some of the final plats were basically blessed, but they were completely different from the subdivision rules that were adopted. So basically those got, if you want to call it, vesting rights. Some were vested. Now, when we do have those come up like that, we still go back to the lot of record date for 1996. That's, as John stated, that is our starting point. Now, if we could research the engineering, because engineering, they got all some of those old plats on file. If we could research and we could prove that that lot was basically blessed by engineering, it was approved by stormwater. The plat basically was halfway done, but just the rules changed, it didn't get final blessed. We make those calls like that instead of sending them all the way back to the planning process when it's basically 2 or 3 lots that need to be built upon, and they are not a plat book and page book number, but they was done before we adopted all these new subdivision rules back in 1993. And there are, especially on North End, there was things back in the rolling back then before we adopted in 1993. And I got a thick green book, and I call that. I roll on them and I do not lose that green book, because we have to look at those things. They're from old engineering files. So we look at those on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of the scale of which we've got some in the Panhandle that are in the tune of 50,000 units of basically pre-approved from 1960s, that first Florida boom, that are on the books, and you can't do anything about them. You can't bring any concurrency to them. You can't bring any services to them because they were platted and basically blessed. So I'm just wondering if we have any of those where you might, and the scale of which, I mean, the biggest one might be what, like a 20 or 30 unit, or
I
maybe
wouldn't
bigger?
even say, I wouldn't even say that now. When I first got started in 2000, there were plenty of them, but there was some action taken by the board back then on that, and there was a chart that we had to look at. But now, it's not that many now, but every now and then they may pop up. I would say you may get like five lots out of one of these subdivisions that still remain. But Mr. Gay, that's a very good point. We really don't have those now because it was prevalent when I started back in 2000 as a front county plan. That's why they told us do not lose that Greenwood, because they realized there was a lot of plats that were basically blessed but not really approved by the board.
Cool.
So
Thank you,
it's not that
Chairman.
way anymore.
Yeah, I just always look at those unintended, things you bring in when you do as a chairman, but thank you guys. Thank you.
I have a feeling we'll be seeing recommendations from now, forever trying to clean up and alter for some time. And that's, again, like the former, it's there to clean and reduce obfuscation. That's a good thing. So, if anybody in the public, I think Mr. Downs is the only one signed up to speak, and I think he just ran out. Give him a second to come back in. Is anybody else on the?
Well, I would just say again, movement toward, what do you call it, the moment of perfection, or, we try to make them, but I always look for moments of progress, and if we keep on making progress, then I think we're.
This is just trying to do a little clarity, clean up. There's been a little bit of confusion, a couple minor subdivisions that came in lately that, no, this is my starting point. We have our procedure and policies that we've always gone by here, but when someone reads it, it comes sometimes not as clear to them, and this is just making it clear to the public.
Very good. Mr. Downs?
Hello, Larry Downs Jr. again. I'm not quite sure on this issue here. I would like to request that either this be put off a little bit longer before y'all vote on it, or to give the public a little bit more time, because it seems like that this is going to restrict existing minor subdivisions. It's going to restrict them in some manner.
It's not, Mr. Downs, let me help you out. No, it's not. No, it's not. As a matter of fact, we do have these regulations in place right now. This is just gonna, consistency and just to clean it up. Clarity, that's all it's done for clarification, to make sure that with the minor subdivisions, we do not, subdivisions, Mr. Gray can add into this, or Mr. Powell, subdivisions, we have to look at the totality of an area. And we have to make sure that this, right here, that's what we adopted it, that minor subdivisions, that people don't take advantage of the minor subdivision by trying to preempt the subdivision rules from final plat and preliminary plats. So we're just making it clear that these are the standards for a minor, which basically is going to help with infill development for these little landowners that may have some large lots of land and they don't want to, they really don't want to become a developer. They don't want to give it to the family. They want to fill in and put some houses on some lots. So this is the purpose of a minor. They have the consistent roadways, they have work on stormwater, everything is there. They just got some land they don't want to deed to their children. It's currently in the books right now, and this just gonna clarify to make it better so that we will not have someone trying to preempt the subdivision rules that is established by the Plat Act.
Well, I don't know who would want to become a developer with all this mess anyways. But one other thing, to take advantage, me and Horst, we've known each other a long time.
Yes, we have.
But to take advantage, that's the reason why we have to find loopholes. Otherwise, we can't even exist. We can't even move forward with anything. And when we figure out a loophole, take advantage to try to create houses or create a dwelling or put a mobile home somewhere and try to find a spot. Call it take advantage, call it loopholes. Mr. Reagan expressed that. These aren't loopholes. These are people trying to live free. But I just think that it will restrict it, and of course, taking advantage, but y'all gonna do whatever y'all gonna do. I'm just saying, is this ever gonna end?
If, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and speak just to the speaker here. So I think what Mr. Jones was trying to impart to you was this idea that, a lot of people are intimidated by all these processes and all these different layers of bureaucratic, regulation and this maze that has been created. I think what we're trying to say is there's an interesting moment where if you can encourage the ability for someone who doesn't have a team of lawyers and a large bank behind them to do something, you've kind of opened up the ability for someone to actually realize a little bit more of the American dream, which is to take something you've had, you built, maybe you bought that 40 acres, maybe you had that given to you, and you can turn it into something else. It's something a little bit more, I think this one maybe opens the door or enables that person to sort of realize that potential on their own without having 15 Merediths and so many Horace Joneses in your team to then, be that sophisticated, slick, come in town and be the developer. I thought it was a neat, and if that does not resonate with you, I don't know you very well.
Well,
like every other.
No, that does resonate with me, but like I say, in every good one, in every little nuance in here, or every little section, there's probably a couple somewhere else that you're not, that you're like, wow, would have been great, now it's not.
Well, I think what I've noticed, and I've just told them, I don't know if you were in the room or not, I have a feeling from now heretofore, going forward, based on what has happened in the past, we will continually be doing little, not Scrivener's errors, but just cleanup, constant cleanup. And I think, at least in my opinion, knowing from a long time that they are going in the right direction, and that, like I said, the effort, as a person who wants to go in and build their own house, there's areas, not here, but Georgia, other places, they won't let you build your own house on your own lot.
Oh, yeah.
And it's infuriating, and I've gone to this place. Here, you go, and I would get upset because the requirements, based upon someone else's interpretation, may be different, and they were totally all over the place. And I know, just by looking at all this, this will continually be changing and evolving, and I think, and I'm happy with that, if it's all towards the goal of making it clearer and easier to understand. It's just like we come in here day in, month in, month out. If there's a big issue, I always feel for people that come in and have to get up, and we have to basically, in about 30 seconds, tell them, oh, you can state your opposition, but it better be in this, and this format. That is for us, and it's intimidating people. It shouldn't be intimidating, and I believe that even in getting a approval process, they're gonna go to the county and they're gonna say, help, how do I work my way through this? And invariably, every time as a developer, you take that attitude, it's successful. If you go in there and say, try to enforce your will and plans upon somebody, it usually doesn't work out as well. But all I'm saying is that I think that there'll be continually be recommendations for approvals, changes, alterations, and as long as, in my opinion, as long as it's towards the goal of clarification, simplicity,
Yeah, well, as long as it's clarification and not restrictions hidden in it, then that's great. But one quick thing, and then I'm done. I don't think we have a board in this county, or a committee, or advisory board, which y'all are basically advisory board, and they generally go with what y'all send. I would like to move forward with what you're talking about, with clear, with clear intent on every one of these, so it's just really clear. And if staff brings something that's complicated, or something that creates a conundrum, let's nip that in the bud right away. I'd even go so far as suggesting to the county commissioners that we create a constitutional or freedom board. We have every other kind of board here in our county. Tell us when we can go to the bathroom, where, and what permit price to pay for it. Maybe we should have a board that just oversees, and gives a recommendation as to whether or not our county government is moving towards, a freer society that we've drifted from in the past 70, 80 years. Thank you. Anyways, that's my thoughts.
Chair, just for staff purposes, and just because this is being recorded and stuff, just so I just go through part of these sections real quick.
Yes.
Just showing number 6 here, the effective period, that had to do with the approval process, so this is just cleanup by moving it down to the approval process. As you can see, this is copied word for word, just moving it down. Okay. Moving down to the next section here, which is an added line here for the purpose of the LDC, the lot of record as defined in chapter 6, so that way we know where you find the definition of here. A little more cleanup there as well. Moving down, this was kind of the verbiage that was getting us a little bit of a headache, using the creation of lots by the division of a parcel. So we clean it up to use a lot of record. That is what staff's policy has always been, is what we've used in-house for minor subdivisions, but it became a little bit of a headache during a couple minor subdivisions coming through. So this is just clarifying that it is a lot of record, our starting date, not any parcel split at any time. And it's the rest of the part there. Just want to show this because the review, there are people, streaming at home possibly, and just lets them see what we're changing here. And that's all that we have from staff.
No, I appreciate that. I had the, got the pleasure of reading this on my own. Maybe somebody didn't today, so very good. All right, unless there's any other comments or questions from the board, I'll entertain a motion.
No, I feel really comfortable moving this one forward, and so I'm going to make a motion that we approve for the BOCC consideration as shown today.
Second. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously. Go forward to the Board of County Commissioners for recommendation. And I believe, let's see. Next, we'll go into our action discussion info items and the lovely shipping containers discussion. He's back.
Not like yours. All right, so the ordinance that you recommended, I think in April, it showed up in the form of BCC in May. The board requested that it come back to you for further discussion. There was not a lot of instruction that the commissioners gave to planning. They heard from, I believe, 4 members of the public who spoke both on the commercial and the non-residential, the residential and the non-residential aspects of the ordinance as to what their objections were. I think the only feedback from us that was solicited, Horace commented at least twice, that we were trying to address provisions in the code because currently all the code says about shipping containers, and in fact not specifically about shipping containers, but the broader category that they fit within. It says portable storage containers. We do have provisions to allow use of shipping containers as defined in the proposed ordinance, as well as ones that don't meet that definition but are also portable storage containers, your pods, mobile attic, rat pack, all those names you see on those containers. So those are allowed, but they're all under temporary provisions. They're not intended to be there permanently. So our intent was to extend the coverage, if you will, for shipping containers to address permanent uses, and we broke that down into residential and non-residential. So some of the feedback at the meeting, on the residential side, that came across to me as saying the provisions were too permissive. We were proposing to allow shipping containers in residential areas beyond what this person thought was appropriate. And then it was less clear to me the issue with non-residential use. One of the commissioners said they believe they should be allowed wherever outdoor storage was allowed. And they generally would be, but I think what was lost in that statement is as accessory structures, they would be allowed more often or in more places than they would simply as outdoor storage. In other words, outdoor storage isn't allowed everywhere. So we returned to the provisions. I would say probably the first half of the provisions are roughly identical to what they were before. If we could go to page 2, I'll just point out item E, the permanent placement. Right. Did you have a question already?
No, I just, what stuck out to me was the only through a county land use certificate.
Right.
Has that always been the case, or is this a new?
Well, again, we don't, it's
Right.
always been the case for, portable storage containers.
Temporary.
The current provisions for them, let me clarify, current provisions say if you're gonna keep this container, again, not necessarily shipping containers, but they fit into the category, if you're gonna keep them, for 30 days or less, you're supposed to let the county know that it's there. If you're gonna keep it for more than 30 days, up to 90 days, you get authorization for that. And you can get, it's normally limited to 90 days and for one container, but you can request more than one, and you can request extensions beyond the 90 days. So it's similar to what people do now for fences, and that was intentional, primarily to know, are you looking to simply place these as storage, as items of storage, like you're going to sell them, as you would with a mobile home vendor. They would just be sitting on a lot, and it would be for sale, or otherwise stored, like they might be in a salvage yard. So all of those are covered through outdoor storage provisions of the code. The other side of that is use as structures. And if you simply say that wherever they are, however they're used, they're just outside storage, now you remove any coverage, if you will, or any, you made the disconnect between them and any building code provisions they may need to adhere to as structures. And quite honestly, they meet the definition of a structure just by the placement. So we've tried to address permanent placement again, both for residential uses and for non-residential, and trying to take into account the concerns that were raised for residential. We limited the zoning districts, and they're kind of at both ends of the zoning spectrum. There would be allowed in the ag zoning, the rural residential, and the rural mixed use, the three rural zoning districts. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the commercial, heavy commercial, and light industrial, and the industrial districts. Then another concern expressed seemed to focus on obviously the visibility of them, how close they could be. So we were looking at applying some minimum lot sizes, so these don't end up in subdivisions that have quarter acre or smaller lots. And
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I thought we had addressed that when we put together the.
Well, we've talked about all of this several times, I think. We've
There
gone around and around. And
there were provisions
the-
regarding lot size. Some of the objection was that it wasn't really a linear kind of.
Yeah, we did the side
Arrangements.
screening, the front, back. I think the problem is,
Is this below an acre? Did we allow below 1 acre?
yes, I don't even think we talked about, we didn't put that on it. What we did is talk about the side, the visual side and front, from the right, not just from the roadway, but from the side of someone's house. I think the problem is, this is the first time the Board of County Commissioners has chewed on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been kind of, from what I gather, somebody spoke, worried about it being in their, neighborhood.
Yeah, and I wish they were here today, but
Sure.
quite honestly, there wasn't, my recollection was not a lot of discussion among commissioners, or quite honestly, with us sitting at the table, beyond Horace's comment that right now, the only terms in the code address shipping containers as portable storage containers, not as any permanent use. So, we left again with not really specific direction, but having heard what was said, saying, all right, let's try to further address it. So we've removed the availability for shipping containers to be used as storage sheds on residential lots within, you might say, the middle zoning districts. The residential lots and the mixed use lots, left them to the to the rural districts and put them in the commercial industrial districts. And then provided some lot size limits because, and this may sound odd, but indeed we have some single-family platted residential subdivisions that are in commercial zoning. They were C1, or they may have been mixed R6 and C1, and the developer bought that property, and because commercial zoning, C1, C1 allowed single-family subdivisions and allowed them at sufficient density, then the developer developed it, and the zoning didn't change. So you have this oddity that you might have a vacant residential lot that's zoned commercial, and yet it was platted for the purpose of single family. So that's why these other limitations are there, is to avoid, again, you might say, commercial use within a residential area.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, I thought we also separated this out to at 1 acre parcel and above, it's allowed 1 storage container as a permanent. At 2 acre, so basically right now, it's nothing less than 2 acres anyway, so we basically said the first thing you can do is start out with is, you can go up to 2.
If you're in those.
If you're in those categories.
If you're in the rural districts, the other, when you're in a commercial, heavy commercial, light industrial, or industrial, the minimum is a half acre. So that allows a residential property that's really in a non-residential zoning and likely subject to other non-residential influences or neighboring uses to have a shipping container as a accessory structure. And it's likely that with half-acre lots that we didn't figure we'd be within any platted residential subdivisions. That's a provision that could be added. We could specifically exclude platted single-family residential subdivisions, like regardless of lot size, if you wanted to do that.
I have 2 questions, just real quick.
Go ahead.
On the temporary placements, so I go off and I order my temporary because my house is in construction or whatever, a pod or whatever that is. Construction doesn't go as planned, I'm over the 90 days, what happens now?
You simply request extension giving us that
Okay.
reason. So you were approved for your 90 days, you're not meeting it for whatever reason. It's not of your own making, and
Do I, as a resident of Escambia County, when I go to pod and I say I want a shipping container because whatever reason, do I know that I need a statement from y'all saying it's okay for me to have it for 30 days or 90 days or whatever?
for the 30 days, there isn't any formal
Okay.
authorization. You're supposed to, per the code, you're supposed to, you or the provider are supposed to notify the county that it's there. The problem, this comes up with signs or anything that we call temporary. We could even write what the period of time is, and that's really necessary if we're gonna call something temporary, is to assign a time to it in some form, whether it's a number of days or from the time of, let's say, a building permit is issued to the time the CO is issued. Some bookends to define this temporary period. If we just say something is temporary, and even if we assign a time, if we don't know when it begins, and then there's a complaint that something has been there too long, for code enforcement, the perspective is the day they go out there and it's there. They don't have any record of prior. So establishing some kind of record for any kind of temporary use is needed.
So and again, we'll go back to the scenario, because I don't know if I would have, maybe if I called pod, maybe they would have known that I needed this. But I almost see that it's almost too much for code enforcement to, I mean, if I'm paying for the pods to be there, and I'm paying a monthly fee for it, And my job ends up being a year job where I just had a hurricane, and now, you know, I may not be back in my house permanently for a year, but I have to keep renewing this ongoing certificate along with paying my monthly fee to the portable container. I mean, this is, again, a commercial portable container. I get it if I say, hey, go down the street and I'm just gonna pick up a container and throw it on my yard, and I'm not renting it, it's not a portable, that to me, it's not portable. Portable is, you're paying a fee for this container to be on your property. I'm not sure I care to tell the county that how long it's gonna be there, because I don't know. And I don't know if it's really, for y'all's enforcement, even a viable thing for y'all to try to enforce.
Well, that's already in the code, and it came about because apparently they stayed around longer than what people thought they should.
Right?
So those provisions, again, have been in the code for several years now.
Okay.
And
Is it more of an Escambia code, kind of code, or should it be more of a subdivisional thing, you know,
CCNR?
yeah, you know, a requirement of your subdivision of you can't have these for X number of period of time?
Because they're allowed to more or less be placed anywhere on the property, particularly front yards, I think that was part of the concern.
Okay.
If everyone had just been placing them in their backyard, then you probably wouldn't have had any
Yeah, but you
concerns.
can't bring an 18,
Exactly.
you know, an 18-wheeler to the backyard and drop it off and run over
Right.
your whatever.
So they're put where they're functional.
Right.
If you're gonna renovate or a couple of rooms in your house, you're probably just gonna set it in the driveway as close to your
Well,
door as
it's where the
possible.
truck can get to. That has nothing to do with what's convenient for me, it's what's convenient for the truck who drops it off. 'Cause the
And
truck's not
the
really going
driveway
through.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
So-
contractors.
So,
And that's, yeah.
again, those provisions are in place. That's what the code currently says. You know, if you think that should be revisited, that can be done. I remember working on those provisions.
All right.
In the case of, and it could have been post-Ivan, like 3 years now have passed and they're still all sitting out here. I would venture a guess that immediately after a countywide disaster, that there were declarations that covered those kinds of issues for an extended amount of time, and then after that time, it was back to the normal approach to things. And that made Horace isn't here, he probably would have a little institutional memory on why those provisions were created. That would be my guess.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, those were adopted after Ivan. There were relaxing of those policies because of the declaration of emergency, and that's happened within both jurisdictions, the county and the city. And I don't know the extent of the period. It might have been more than 36 months, but it was a considerable amount of time, given the breadth of the storm and the impact, that they did relax all these things in that case. And that would happen again if we have Hurricane X or Y. Those would occur again. I would also, you know, let you know that I thought we had talked about making the CO was the time at which that we basically relaxed the ability for that storage to consider. I thought we considered that if you had an open permit out and you had yet to obtain your CO, that it was not a requirement that someone like Reed would have to reissue another 180-day or another 90-day permit with us. I thought that we had.
I don't remember that being in there. I can look, and if that's something that you think.
Because that was the bookend I thought we talked about. You got your building permit, there's the start point. You get your CO, there's the other end of the bookend, and that's your period of time with which you maintain this on your property.
And I think, you know, even to one more step further, you got your CO, and then you now have 120 days or whatever to get it out, because
Okay.
you still got to move things in, you still got all those instances where just because the CO's issued doesn't mean all construction's gone. That means most of your construction gone and you're trying to move in, but now you have some time period to get all that stuff taken care of. And that's, you know, again, I didn't realize that in the code that it was as restrictive on the temporary as it was, according to what you just said. And then again, when talking about what we talked about last time, a lot of those things are in this one for the permanent, and I'm confused of how this went so far off of where we thought we were going.
So,
The sizes and
so
such.
back up to the temporary, the first one deals with portable storage containers and something makes reference to Article 7, where those provisions are, and then adds the use, by contractors during construction. I know that's not the use you're referring to. And then the seasonal storage that occurs, with some retailers. And we did get some feedback on that issue. We got some feedback from the Santa Rosa Island Authority, and they do occasionally authorize shipping containers, for seasonal use adjacent to an existing retailer. They didn't have a lot of details on that, so I just put language that it's pretty much per their negotiations with those users.
You know, I think the motivation was well placed. It's almost to me kind of like fencing companies. You call today and say, hey, I want a fence around my house. Sure, no problem, we'll be out there, we'll do it. Afterwards, did you guys ever get a permit? No. And they wouldn't unless somebody called in or said, hey, whoa, are you sure this is on their property line, whatever. I mean, I would bet a large portion of residential fences go without getting a permit. Maybe I'm wrong.
No.
However, so what should we do? Should we create, laws enforcing the fencing, that we could go into? I mean, people are gonna use these containers. My fear is that we can work you to the nub on this, and we're gonna send it to the Board of County Commissioners and start over, and back and forth and back and forth. Look, is there a problem? And is it to help the enforcement folks to actually be able to do something, and then go out and say, well, we'll start to 30 days now, and are they gonna have to track that and come back out 30 days? I mean, I don't know. I think this is great. I think we've done a lot of, discussion, we talked back and forth, argued about, I think, almost anything imaginable with these things. I guess it would be my question to the Board of County Commissioners, do you want or feel the need to have any, enforcement regarding these particular types of containers? Yes or no? And if you do, let's start all together. God almighty, we'll get a board, like you said, have somebody else, the container board come together and work with you. You've already done the 90% of the work, but I have a feeling we will go back and forth with this for months on end and not really come to any resolution. I don't think there's in one Board of County Commission meeting, given the other agenda items, I don't see how somebody can't be out there and certainly throw enough doubt, because there's enough to argue about in this. We've done it for months. And we may try to craft just the perfect set of rules about it, but it's gonna aggravate somebody. My question is.
You got the one side, allow anywhere, everywhere, whoever wants one, however many they want, stacked, unstacked, painted, unpainted. You got that, and you got none, anywhere, ever. The only place I wanna see them is in a shipping port, on a train, or on a truck going down the road. Truly,
So today, let me ask you, so today in my subdivision, say it's not in our bylaws or anything else, a neighbor comes and plops a couple in there, oh, don't worry, they'll only be here for a little bit. A year and a half later, I call code enforcement. What does code enforcement do? This guy, Mr. Downs, has them all over the place. He told me they'd only be there for a week, so I gotta keep thinking.
What would you, here was Horace's statement to the Board of County Commissioners at least twice. Again, there wasn't much that they engaged us regarding. But Horace said, currently, within the land development code, there are no provisions, none, that authorize shipping containers to be placed anywhere outside of, their normal industrial use in that shipping process. There's no provisions other than the portable storage container provisions that are there to address temporary uses. And you can decide that it's unclear, that if you're working under a building permit, that you not to have to deal with anything unless it's there 60 days beyond the end of that permit. We can look into that. I was just giving a basic description of up to 30 days and beyond 30 days. My memory is saying, no, it's not particular to the concern you raised. But anyway, those are the only provisions that are there in the code now. There's nothing outside of you essentially using shipping containers as components of a structure, and you've had an engineer tell building inspections, this will meet Florida building code.
Does code enforcement have the ability and or the authority to evict them or write people up for having them on their property?
Yes, they've been cited.
How many violations in the last 6 months?
2. I don't know, but they're on hold. They're not pursuing anything further, knowing that this is not an addressed issue.
Let me just also jump in here a little bit too, if you don't mind. A lot of this has come up through the DRC review when we have new site plans come in, or someone's, again, like Mr. Gregorio said, they're not allowed anywhere right now in currently industrial. We're trying to come up with an ordinance here to allow them in other areas. So giving some provisions, if they are going to be allowed, this would be, considered more of a temporary use. We've had, right over here behind us, this pawn shop that wants to put 4 of them in the back to, put storage in there, take all his lawnmowers out, put them up on the street, and at the end of the day, put them all back in the storage. Right now, the zoning does not allow it unless he's zoned industrial. So by going through this ordinance and stuff like that, you're starting to give some of these businesses the opportunity to, hey, I can put a storage container in my back or something like that, or I can, during the seasonal of summer and stuff like that, I'm selling mowers, I can load them up in there and bring them back out. Right now, there's currently nothing for this pawn shop to do that. So we're trying to give them more of a leeway. So this, if anything, this is helping, Mr. Downs' aspect, that he's always, got more freedom, people do what they want. This is going in that direction.
I feel like, Mr. Chairman, I feel like we're on Groundhog Day, and we are just doing this again and again. We all know this stuff. We all know. We all get it. We've been through this before. I'm just asking you quickly. We sent something to BOCC. They've sent something back. You modified it and showing it to us here right now. Is that what's happened?
Yes.
In a nutshell? And the big movement, the big changes, everything was, is everything that you changed underlined here? Or can we get a document
I
progress?
didn't do it as a
color?
strike through and underline because it's all underlined and didn't want it to be confusing. I'm trying to tell you.
Well, trust me, it's confusing.
I'm trying
Can I
to
ask
tell
you this?
you where the changes are and what they affected, and we've gotten into residential.
Do you have the ability to show, like in a Word document, your recent edits and your edits that were 2 months ago edits? Like with a different color of underline or highlighting, what's it called, the progress? When you show up in editing.
I can, quite honestly, it probably would all
Track
be
changes.
struck through.
Can you show a track changes version of this that shows us what we just did after
I
BOCC
find
had?
those to be terribly confusing if I'm working with other people.
I find this to be
I
terribly
send something,
confusing.
well, but here, everything it's gonna say is here. If you're saying, I don't wanna really read again what I already read,
Yeah.
that's hard to
Yeah,
help,
I
because it
know.
really works as an integrated whole, it isn't.
I don't want to go back to the beginning. Let me ask you this. Can we send this document to the Board of County Commissioners and give them some time to digest this, review it, send back their, I'd love for them, every one of them to have a copy of this, highlight, mark up, question, whatever you want to. But we will not get anything done if we just keep bouncing back and forth.
I wish Horace was here, he would probably say,
If who was?
suggest to take it as an item to the committee of the whole. I don't know what happens when clearly you would not be sending it as an ordinance to be adopted. So it's not on that formal track for action, but I'm not aware of a time in the past where this board can't really decide what it wants to recommend, and really committee of the whole has been the opportunity.
I don't think we have a problem. I think we've gone through it enough to where ad nauseum, I think We may not agree with everybody, but I think we've come up with something. What you have, to me, quite frankly, is at least 4 months worth of, I know for you probably more, but of fussing back and forth, arguing, no, take that out, put this in. I would recommend that we do send it then to the committee of the whole, if that's gonna, let it be a working document. And have them send it back to us with their recommendations. Allow the county commissioners to have, you know, their say in it. Have them chew on it and then send it back. We go through the main items of contention and send it back to them for their approval. If they deny it, they deny it. We're right back where we started. We don't have anything. And, you know, so at the beginning I questioned, do we need anything? To your point, you know, given the pawn shop folks and or whatever else, at least have a, I guess we're just drawing the lines, you know, where you can play within those lines with these things legally and not have to be in limbo, like I'm assuming that folks who've been written up are kind of wondering what they're gonna do with their stuff.
There's several of them now, you know, I spoke with one a few weeks ago saying, well, I want to move them, but I want to move them and then find out I'm 2 feet closer to the property line than I need to be under the provisions. So yes, there are property owners and code enforcement officers waiting to know,
Well,
you know, how to address this.
I just think in the interest of actually getting something done that's of merit, I don't know, what would staff recommend us doing with the Board of County Commissioners? How would we approach it with them to ask for their input, giving them adequate time, not an hour and a half, 3 hour Board of County Commission meeting to chew on it? I'm sure that they look at their stuff prior to that, but again, maybe give them some time to input, strike through, mark up, send back.
I think the general process is to ask if it could be an agenda item on a committee of the whole.
Okay.
I mean, it's their option to say, yeah, we want to talk about it or not.
Yeah.
So
Let
do
me,
public put
let me
it
get to
before?
public input on this. I'm sorry, we could keep going
Yeah,
around this.
please.
Mr. Bearden.
Yeah, thank you. Michael Bearden, 11716 Chanticleer Court. I've spoke on this every time it's come up here and at the commissioners meeting. I'm his Mass Transit Advisory Vice Chair, as a matter of fact. To me, as the gentleman stated, you know, yes, we'd send out code enforcement, yet we've had hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff doing all this work and going to the chair and everything like that, and we've had 2 complaints in over 6 months. You know, we're spending all these hours and man hours and tax money on something nobody needs. Because as he said, there's already regulations. Why are we trying to over-regulate even more and more of private property? I'm just at the completion of building my brand new die-in house, okay? I'm a very lucky person. I worked hard to get to where I am. And I still don't have my certificate of occupancy. Why? Because they came out with something called a pressure test for the HIVAC people that I didn't know, and I called up my HIVAC people and they said, what the hell is that? You know, and it's the same thing with all this. There are thousands of containers right now in this county that are in these positions that we're talking about that would not meet this myriad of confusion. I asked the very first time to Mr. Jones about all those. What are we going to do about those? He says, oh, we'll leave those alone. How can we leave thousands alone and somebody put one on a spot and say, we're going to punish you, we're going to fine you? Every single one of those you do, if they have any backbone or background at all, they're going to sue. And you're going to have multiple lawsuits for constitutional amendment problems, for abusing their freedom and their right to use their own property, and saying, how can you punish me when there's one right across the street there that you're not touching? Why? Because it was there before you did this. We may get in another couple hundred of these things that would be affected by this in the next 5 years. But in the meantime, we've got 10,000 of them that aren't affected. So how are we going to adjust to that? Every time it goes before the commissioners, they're going, oh, we don't want to deal with that. Let's send it back to the advisory board. The last time they said, let's drop it. And then it came back to you again. And like you said, you guys have interacted about this ad nauseum. And you guys got a lot of stuff you got to cover that's considerably more important than this. I remember the very first time I said, how about the one right out the back window? And all you guys went, oh, hell, there's one there too. You know, what do pawn shops that have sidewalk and parking lots where they put stuff out like every other store does, go downtown Pensacola, you see the same thing, where they pull their dresses out and everything. Are we gonna stop them from doing that as well? When do we quit over-regulating when it's not necessary, when, as the gentleman said, we already have regulations? My neighbors, if they don't like my container I have, which is still there, been there almost a year, because I've been doing construction. Not a single one of them came over and complained. A couple said, you mind if I throw something in it? I said, sure, have a good time. If I had put a container there.
Can I ask a question before, your time's run out, but I'm gonna ask you a question, it's gonna give you
Please.
more time. Do you mean your C and D like your dumpster, or do you mean your container?
Well, that's a dumpster,
Yep,
you know, but dumpster, container.
it's not the same thing.
Lawnmower, whatever
It's not
next.
the same thing.
The point is, at a construction site, I have a container there. If I had done the 90-day rule and said, okay, I'll do the permit if this is passed, here, then, 90 days, I still need it again, and I come back and ask the county again, I'll guarantee that they're gonna go, no, pull it. You know?
Yeah, just to be clear, your C and D dumpster isn't the same thing that we're talking
Well, I
about.
understand that,
Yeah,
but it's
okay.
the same
So the-
basic type of thing.
Yeah.
If my neighbors didn't like it, they'd say, when are you gonna get that out of there? If my neighbors don't like my container, they're gonna come to me. And then I gotta decide if I wanna get along with my neighbors, or if they gotta decide they wanna push it somewhere else. That's what we do, we interact with society, that's what America's all about.
So would you
America's not
recommend
about-
to the pawn shop owner that he should have the right to have those 4 containers out there? Or that he should just push it out the street and put it back in the store like you said that the other folks do?
If the container is within his property, he's got a right to it.
Well,
It's his property.
According to what we have now in place, apparently not.
Yeah, and we
Is
all
that correct?
Right.
I
And we
mean,
have stuff in place
The way
right
the code
now.
works now, he's not allowed to have it.
So
What
he's-
we're trying to do is work out a system where he can have it.
Right.
This whole board's been working for months to make something that's that's illegal, legal. We've been working very hard to make it such that something that we're not allowed to do is something that we are allowed to do, but we're trying to make it in a reasonable, meaningful, logical way to make it make sense.
So in the same way, we're making a lot of things illegal.
Well, no, we're telling you this, and I'm gonna make it really clear. We're taking something that's illegal to do and making it legal to do.
So are we gonna go around and get rid of the 10,000?
There aren't 10,000, but I'll say
Oh,
this,
there
we're
are.
trying to make something
you
that's
think
not
there'll be
allowed.
10,000 complaints, but what if the complaints come? What rules, what set of rules do they go by? Just let it go to a court, the courtroom?
But what are we gonna do when all these other containers that are out there and people go, ooh, we got a law now, I don't like that one there, I don't like that one there.
Well, just to your point, if they're not doing it now, what's gonna do it now? All of a sudden, because we passed an ordinance, you think people are gonna go, hey, I've got something to go complain about?
Yeah, how are we gonna
I
have
don't
the
think
amount
that's
of
the
people we
case.
have to hire for code enforcement for something like
Do you,
this? And what
do you
would
think
the
they're gonna
fines
set
be?
up a bunch of people to go out and get rid of the ones that are not legal?
They want us-
What we're trying to do is craft something that makes sense for these particular people for their use.
Again, code enforcement works by complaint driven.
Right.
We're not out there surveying every lot. As well, when we talk about these 2 complaints in the last 6 months, whatever, those are complaints that actually fell through. Most time it's going out there, hey, you need to remove these because your zoning doesn't allow for it, and they remove them off. So there is no real true complaint that actually goes through the whole process. You know, the code enforcement's very good with working with the public, trying to get them to resolve their issue and understand. We've had multiple issues through DRC where, you know, we have 2 or 3 storage containers at a automotive shop, and they're full of tires. And outside there's tires and that. Well, there's always different regulations through the state that you can't have more than 400 tires on a property unless you're licensed this and that, and you have all the proper procedures, because tires catch on fire, they don't go out easy. So there's always fire safety procedures that also fall in line. And those, I mean, there's multiple incidents I can go through and tell you. These are just procedures for, yes, they wanna have them. Fire safety needs to know what's in them when it comes to commercial use. You know, so it goes beyond just, when it comes to commercial use, hey, yeah, you can just have one. Well, fire safety's gonna wanna know what's in them. Are you having any explosives? How much gas you gotta have in them? There's a lot of stuff that we review when we go through the development review process. So it's not just, yeah, you can have one. We have to go through a process to figure out what's gonna be in there, because when fire safety shows up for a fire and it's next to someone storing a whole bunch of gasoline or something real explosive in there, now you have a bigger problem. A whole bunch of people die because they know it was in there. So there's a lot more to go in there.
One thing, you just reminded me of a very interesting thing. There was
Mr. Downs, you can come up and speak after this.
There was a very interesting moment where we had someone storing, let's call them, 2,000 or 3,000 tires open tires out being stored, and they were stored as used tires. And you've seen used tires in your yard, you know what they do? They collect that small little pool of water. And if you would have seen the swarm of mosquitoes that was around this one property, you would understand the very nature of the reason why you have people that regulate things you do on your property, because they affect, and I want to get this quote right, no man's land is an island. Not no man's an island. I've never said no man's an island. That makes really zero sense. No man's land is an island, Mr. Downs. And what that means is if you want to have the freedom to store at a 30-degree angle 4,000 tires on your property, believe me, your neighbors are going to feel the effect of it because they're going to have mosquitoes. They can't enjoy their outside. So what I'm saying to you is, there is that okay, great, which is why we've been here, Mr. Johnson, get the containers, okay. So what we're trying to say is there is an impact off-site of the choices you make on-site.
I totally
And that's
understand the
all,
purpose of
that's the
zoning and
whole,
regulations.
that's the whole
You
essence
don't
of
want
this
to
stuff.
stick fire next to a school, I understand that. We
Sure.
need those types of things.
Sure.
But there's such a thing as overregulation and overburden of the county.
Okay,
It
we're
took
done,
us 2
we're
weeks
done,
to
we're
get
done. Let
electrical
Mr. Downs come
inspection.
up, Mr. Downs come up, you've had your time, we could argue around about this.
And we have for months.
I know, I've been here.
Hello, Larry Downs Jr., I'm requesting an additional 10 minutes, please.
Denied, 3 and go.
Tires do catch on fire, there's no doubt, but if they're stored in a shipping container, it's gonna be contained. A lot better than just storing them inside the building, which people do. Anyways, why can't we just have something simple? Something simple. Something simple that says, start with shipping containers or no longer shipping containers if there's nothing being shipped in them. They have been repurposed. Now it's out of that realm, code enforcement. It's repurposed. Like my buddy said, hey, my shipping container identifies itself as a metal shed. People can do it, sheds can do it. It's under the 400 square foot. Put whatever you want in your shed, in your backyard. How about we make something simple that says, nothing other than a temporary container can be in the front yard or the side yards. How about we leave the backyards alone for the people? We get along with our neighbors. I have a lot of libertarian neighbors on my street. We get along, we don't want y'all. We don't want y'all coming down our private road. We want you to stay away from our property and our business. We're not killing each other, amazingly, because we're not up there asking y'all to solve our problems. And we have problems and we handle them. We get along. Ask and the government shall provide. All right, there's a lot of things that we could do to make it simple. Commercial, this pawn shop here, from what I've seen on the map, I think it's zoned HCLI. Heavy commercial, light industrial. I was just told that they're not zoned, unless they're zoned for industrial. Well, what's light industrial? It's industrial. They should be able to have their container if they want to put, go-karts or plants. It's their business. It's not, what, is it gonna be too ugly from here? Come on, it doesn't matter. They're trying to make a living, they employ people. Let's let them do it. Let's make this real simple. And I'm telling you, I've talked to some of the county commissioners, and I'm gonna talk to them really hard now, because I really would like this to be simplified. And I think it could be done just by simply saying nothing in the front yard, nothing in the side yards. If it's against your covenants and restrictions in your neighborhood association will take care of it. If it's rural property, why are you trying to put something on rural property? They're not bothering you. They're not bothering their neighbors. I mean, it's just overregulation again, like we hear, and I know it's a broken record, but y'all keep playing it. We're not. More paperwork is created. More code enforcement is created. Now we need to notify you, let you know, hey, it's been 30 days. I'll take any questions, Mr. Allen.
Mr. Griff.
I would just like you to quote me correctly when you put your initials
The
in.
wheels,
It's the same thing.
the wheels are spinning. I'm just looking at you, and I guess my question would be to Mr. Don's point. We are dealing quite a bit in semantics between containers, shipping containers, and or we have rules in place for sheds, correct? We've been through this, I know, and I'm asking you probably to repeat yourself. How would we go about transferring, after the allotted time frame that these are now no longer shipping containers and/or whatever they may be called, into conform with?
Here's how I see it. You can say, okay, isn't it clear to everyone, these are shipping containers and what you ought to be able to do with? To me, it's not. What if the next thing is, I'm gonna give me a bus body. My school buses have a lot of windows, and I'm gonna call that my greenhouse. Or I'm gonna get a semi-trailer, and I'm gonna use it and say that's my storage shed. They might be converted to these things, but until they are converted to them, they are their original thing. It might be an inoperable school bus, or an unusable trailer, or a retired shipping container, but it is an industrial item. That's how it was designed, that's what it was made for.
Right.
The objection is not converting it to those other uses, it's.
I'm not asking we do. My question would be, at what point, I don't care if it's a humongous, if I have, whatever the object is, at what point, how can we have it conform to what we already have existing regarding a storage shed in my backyard? Or why can't we? I guess.
We can,
Okay.
yes.
Again, get out of the business of what we call it, and what its
So-
initial purpose was, who cares? What it's being used
So
for.
given the current provisions for
Yes.
quote storage sheds,
It wouldn't meet any of these.
then it can be processed that way. That's the inquiry that needs to be made. If containers start accumulating on a site, which occasionally they do, and lo and behold, someone complains and they look into it and the site's vacant other than these, and someone decided, yeah, I think I'm gonna sell some, I'm gonna market shipping containers to other people who would like to buy them, maybe as storage sheds. That person should have gone through some authorization. First, determine, does the zoning even allow outdoor storage and that kind of sales? And that would be processed just like if you wanted to sell used automobiles, you would set up that site for that process. If you're just talking about storage sheds on a residential lot, yes, we have provisions. And they can meet whatever building code requirement may or may not apply. Now you move into the commercial realm. There are those provisions, but then there's those you step to, or in quantity, you have to look at site impervious cover. Do you want 10 of them? Are they being placed on pavement?
Well,
Are they being placed in drive aisles, parking spaces, next to emergency exits? I don't know.
So there's two scenarios, but let's just say, I have an acre, I have a home, I decided to put a object on my property. I have it for a year, nobody complains. New neighbors move in, don't like it, come down here and complain. So I would come down to the county and say, apparently I have to pull a permit for my object to be now deemed as as a shed in my backyard. Which is currently on the books now, correct? We have rules for what would be deemed a shed for storage.
There are exemptions, and quite honestly, I don't know how building inspections is going to treat these, because they're not sheds. Most of the information I've gotten from building inspections has dealt with those things that are constructed as sheds. That is, their own skids, they can be dropped off. That's not what you have here, so I don't know if they're gonna consider them the same or not. I don't know if they're gonna require them to be tied down or not, or otherwise attached to a foundation.
Their own
So
skids,
that's where.
and they can be dropped off.
I guess if I'm building a home, I can have a temporary shed, is that correct?
Yep.
What is the shed, what are the stipulations? I forgot, quite frankly, the size, length, width, how it's anchored down.
Less than 400 feet, you do not need a permit.
Yep.
If you're building a house,
So less than 400 feet, does a typical shipping container contain less than 400 square feet?
Yes.
Mostly, yes. Mostly.
Even down to 180 square
Yeah,
feet.
so if we're using it for the same purposes, why are we arguing about semantics of what it was birthed as, what it was now deemed as? If it can't fall under the temporary shed and or utilization for storage, for God's sake, can we call it storage? And it not fall under the existing, requirements? And if somebody decides that they're gonna complain about it, then maybe that's the catalyst. They go down the county and have to, like a fence,
Well, that was
get
the
permit
original
for it.
approach, to
Right.
say, if wherever they're set permanently, they're gonna be considered structures, and that's how they would be dealt with.
Yeah, we talked about this, I mean, for argument's sake, to the point you're making, we could take a shipping container and make sure all the welds are tight, and we could drop it in the bay, put a keel on it, put a motor in the back, and call it a vessel.
Or we could drill holes in it and it'd sink.
Just one second, and I'm just saying this, and for all intents and purposes, the Coast Guard would still need to do a worthiness check of that device, but that's what the Coast Guard's authority is to deal with vessels that are in the water. For some reason, that's the lot they've been drawn in life. Just like we're over here talking about the kind of structures that we can put in part as real property on. And that's why I'm saying the difference between a temporary shelter or a temporary anything, it's not really part of the real property. The minute you make it part of that land, it's now real property, and then it falls on our sorry backs to deal with. So now that's why we're dealing with the thing, because at some point in its life, it was a shipping container. It's an industrial item. It is a very industrial in nature. We see it on trains and ships and trucks. And in some way, we found a way to repurpose it, which is a good thing, into a new life. But when it does that, it becomes real property. When it becomes real property, we then talk about it here, and we find ways to
So if-
either outlaw or make it
So
legal.
if it is this real property and it's been there for over a year, why don't I have to go permanent like it is a new permanent structure on my property? If it conforms to those. I don't care what it is at this point. Now I'm using it for storage. If it's a bus, if it's a school bus, and I have shelled it out and used it because I'm worried about the apocalypse, but it meets the shed requirements.
Yeah, and I think I might have some of the reason why this is a sticking point, and I'll say it is this way, is because that thing was never designed to have a keel welded onto it, it was never designed to have a motor behind it, but it does work as a boat. Just like it was never designed to shed water off the top of it like a roof does. It's never designed to look like a residential structure, which storage sheds are. And in many neighborhoods that are covenant and restricted, they say that the storage shed shall have the same material as the roof, the same material as the walls, the same trim color, the same pink.
I'm great with it.
And
Let the
that's at
subdivision deal with
that,
it.
that's at that far extent of the spectrum.
Right.
But at this extent of the spectrum, this thing was literally designed for something else that we're repurposing into the school bus, the shipping container, the so on and so forth. And since it was never, that's the sticking point that people have, maybe even I've uttered, that it's a sticking point because it was never designed in this functional realm. It does function as it for a period of time, and we ought to try to find a way to consider it as such, so.
Yeah,
And you've been here right with us, we would try to find a way to consider it as such.
I'm just saying, now I'm just arguing for the point of arguing, I wanna kind of flesh this out. We've done it, I mean, I really am, because if I create 4 walls, you know, and I'm now Tim's Barn Builders, I am a shed business. What constitutes the fact that it's a shed, other than the fact that I called it that? You know, if I have these containers and I move them on there, it's the same 4 walls. Now, you're right, I don't wanna get into the engineering of why it was built the way it was, how the welding, because it had a different purpose in its former life. If we're going to use it for this purpose, then why won't we make it conform to the allowable uses that are currently on the books for a shed? If it does not meet it, gotta go. If it's a subdivision, that's good, they can get rid of it, that's right. If you wanna dress it up with the right roof, the exterior of it, put a window on it, and make it look like your house, and it conforms to the subdivision, good for them. But again, the reason I argue this is I don't believe we can come up with a perfect document to please any or everybody.
No one will though, but no one will. We can
No, they
make
won't.
progress though.
Right, but what
Can
I'm
make some
saying
progress.
is, if it is being utilized for the purpose, the same purpose as Tim's sheds, because I call it a shed, and it's a storage unit, that's all, that's just simply for storage. I would bet that that's all they're being utilized for, storage. If they don't conform with current requirements that we have for a storage shed on our property. And like to the point, if it's out on a rural, you know, I don't think we have anything for them. Knock themselves out, they can put what they want out there.
The draft we sent up addressed all these things.
Yeah.
Now they've taken out all the residential, the LDR, MDR. And I just thought the intent of this was we saw a movement of repurposing these things in residential neighborhoods, so we wanted to make it legal.
So
And the draft that we'd sent out did that.
The objection was.
Oh, by the way, my grandfather used a, school bus as a shed.
That was just too permissive, so that's why we essentially removed the core residential zoning and left it at the rural and the commercial.
So, for the sake of argument, can we request either the committee of the whole to give us some guidance? If they believe this is a worthy enough pursuit to continue with this document, at least we gotta start here. Going forward, maybe we'll do a correct, but henceforth, this is the document. Is it worth trying to forge this into some new recommendation and or set of rules and regulations that we give the county to at least govern by? Is it worthy or is it not?
I think we should give them directions on even saying what we talked with, what was discussed was, if it's purposed as a shed, do we not even address it as a container and we call it what its intended purpose is, which is a shed?
Basically, are we creating a new document that is forged for shipping containers? Or B, do we make the shipping containers fall under existing shed and or storage
Yeah,
requirements?
could this be achieved with a change of definitions under sheds and accessory dwelling? Could this be achieved with a definition change in there? Or do we want to move forward with this idea here?
And the reason we ask is not simply to give it the Heisman, but defer it to either the committee of the whole. I want their buy-in. I want someone else to get some skin in the game, because otherwise we will go back and forth and bounce it back and forth. And please ask your county commissioners what their thoughts are. We'd love to hear some more guidance,
Can I
because
say one thing about what Grover said in the meeting?
please do.
Commercial. The reason why he made a motion to send this back to y'all, he said, why is commercial even being mentioned in this? They have 18-wheelers in their yards. Commercial properties have trucks, containers of all sorts. He said, why are we even mentioning commercial in this? And that's why he said commercial should be allowed to have them.
Right.
That's it, that was his words. You can look it up on the video. Mr. Griffin was there.
Again, so back to the committee of the whole. Do we need requirements for residential and or commercial? One or the other, or do they fall under the existing shed requirements? And given the zoning that whatever building is currently under. How do we make a new mousetrap, or do we even bother? I mean, like I said, we will just go back and forth and.
Yeah. Just to speak on the commercial provisions, just because it deals with DRC all the time, there's standards that if you have we've had a small shopping center up north of here, a little grocery store, they've put a couple out, just advertising their shipping containers, and the parking lot's always full, or they have to have a parking open. Now you're taking up, 10 parking spots.
Right. And
So there's all these little standards, provisions that at least need to be put in there saying, you can't be doing this with some type of accessory building or whatever, just for that environment.
And what you're saying, exactly what you just said, you can't go put a shed out there and take up 10 parking spots. Now you've actually removed your parking that you are allowed to have. So I think doesn't matter if it's a shipping container or if it's any.
That's why I left it open like that, just because the way you guys are.
A shed wouldn't be allowed there either.
Right.
Yeah, nothing would be allowed, there's certain things now, for instance, Target on 9 Mile, they have about 30 of them out there right now because of remodeling. Who's to say they don't leave 20 more for the season, this and that, but are they gonna move them back towards the back of the parking lot where people can still, that's up to them, that's their customers.
Yeah.
But it does come the seasonal time when you're required a certain amount of parking spots. If you're leaving those out there past that time, and these parking spots are supposed to be accounted for all those other buildings, not just Target, but all those other businesses out there that need them. Then you got also the fire safety needs of it, so they come in and where are you putting these? We have a fire safety aspect. Make sure you're not blocking any of the way, drive aisles and such.
So why does Mr. Victory get all the easy ones?
He's got a good brain on him. We give him the hard ones.
All right, I mean, really, if there's no other discussion on it, we could beat the dead horse again.
I'll get the horse.
Gentlemen, I'm gonna leave. Y'all have a good day. I started out good, now I'm getting where I'm not good.
We're going to public forum.
I need to leave.
We're going to public forum. That's all right, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on it? Going once? You're welcome to.
I'll get with Horace and, see how we can get it in front of the commissioners.
Okay. Anybody else public want to know their way in here?
Well, yeah.
Oh, well. That's it.
You mind filling this out real quick?
After you're done, you can fill it out.
Okay.
You do one after, sir.
You're right there, yeah, they'll give it to you. Just go ahead and state your name, your address, and then go for it.
Danny Rainey, 625 Bremen Avenue.
Oh, you do?
Recommend that your law should containers on residential and commercial.
Okay.
Thanks.
So him fill that out. That way, Board of County Commissioners, you can have a voice. Otherwise, they wouldn't allow you to speak. So
Okay.
Thank you.
it's important to get you have to start here.
Okay.
Go ahead and fill that out. Anybody else before Ms. Rogers? Come on, Ms. Rogers. Although we're talking about something different. aren't we?
Good morning, Jacqueline Rogers, Cantonment, 1420 Ridgeway. I sent, and I know I sent it later, but I sent you all a copy of some proposed changes to the HCLI ordinance that I'm going to ask the commissioners to look at. One of them was leaving everything in there and my stuff in red, and then my crossouts in red, and then one of them a more clean copy with my stuff still in red so you could identify it wasn't staff that did that. So I sent that in an email if you haven't had a chance to read that. I didn't know if we could discuss it today, but since it was not on the agenda, apparently we're not allowed as outside a public forum. So here I am. We all know that DEO has found that the industrial uses weren't acceptable in the HCLI ordinance. So that is what the one you passed the last meeting was, to take the industrial uses out. So that's good, or that's a good thing. But I still feel like there's some uses in here that are not consistent with suburban flu, which is supposed to be predominantly residential. It's supposed to be predominantly low density residential. I know that can be argued because of the density change in there, but what I did was I just took, this is actually what was tried to do a long time ago when they tried to do the ordinance. I just took your two commercial districts that are already in mixed use suburban, low density mixed use and high density mixed use. Those are already consistent and implement the flu of mixed use suburban. And I went through and I looked at all their uses and compared it to what you guys have on this proposed draft. And I just took out the ones that aren't consistent with those two, because if you read if you go back and read in the code what low density mixed use, it says it establishes appropriate area and land use regulations for a complementary mix of low density residential uses and compatible non-residential uses within mostly suburban areas. What is mixed use suburban? It is a suburban area, and your definition of suburban is low density residential. So the uses that are in low density mixed use, and I even was generous and went up to high density mixed use to throw a couple extra ones in there, that is what we should be looking at for uses in mixed use suburban. I fully recognize that heavy commercial light industrial is a zoning district that is in mixed use urban and other commercial other flus. But in mixed use suburban, these are my requests. So you can see there's a lot of not an MUS or changes in that. So I'd like you to consider it. It's not before you right now. I hope the commissioners spend some time and consider it, but that's what I'm going to ask the commissioners, and I just wanted to put that forward. Also, the reason why DEO said that this was not consistent because of the industrial uses is because some of those properties in this land development regulation flowed down to the commercial use. And it said commercial has industrial in it. Well, do you know that the commercial zoning district is in the mixed use suburban? So therefore, that's not the issue at hand today. It was not the issue of the DOA hearing that's coming up or might be postponed if we can work out a good ordinance here. But the commercial district is not consistent either then, because it has industrial uses in it, and the commercial zoning district should not be in the mixed use suburban flew either. So I would ask you to also take a look at that. That, again, that's not something the commissioners are asking you to do, that's something the public is asking you to do. If you could take a look at that, if DEO said those industrial uses are not consistent with mixed-use suburban, then why is commercial allowed to have that and be a zoning district that's supposedly implementing mixed-use suburban? So I guess that's kind of a wrap up. That's, my time's up, so if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers, and you sent that to the Board of County Commissioners as well?
Yeah, not the thing about the commercial, because I don't know, I don't want to focus, on Thursday for them on that HCLI, but the comment about the commercial I have not brought up. I don't know where that originates. Does that originate at the planning board? Does that originate with the commissioners, or I don't know what your job is, to be honest. I mean, I'm not being sarcastic.
Question the same.
Are you, if the public identifies something, can we come to you and ask you to do something, or does that have to be a political movement and to go back?
No, typically staff will bring something before us and we review what's thrown in front of us. We don't, we're not in the business of crafting anything unless we have input.
Stick around.
Or if we have input from board members, we ask them, we send it back and ask them to, but yeah, the more the merrier. If I think earlier we had I think on this topic earlier, so please send us something beforehand so we can digest it, as opposed to like the county commissioners. It annoys me that if we get in the meeting to try to digest something you put a lot of heart and soul in, it's not fair to us or to you. So I'm all for, any input that you can email or give to the staff that they want to present in the package is even better. Because then it'll get submitted as a part of the record. Then that's upon us, in my opinion, it's on our back to have, to absorb it, or to look at it, or to say, no way, this is nuts, this is defeating the purpose, or it makes perfect sense.
Okay, so for the commercial zoning, how I think it's still going to be inconsistent, do I go to the staff and say, staff, this is, you still have this determination, or do I go to the commissioners first?
Personally, I would think at this point,
That is the decision.
Just a
of yours.
choice?
yeah, and at this point, I mean, we've already made a recommendation for part of it, but at this point, I would say county commissioners. And perfect, had we been prior to earlier today, then I would go to whatever staff member, hey, which staff member is addressing this item? There's no problem with them sending their information to you, is there? I mean, I would think you guys would welcome it.
No,
I think you would welcome it. I would hope that you would get with staff prior to this, prior to our, it makes us look less foolish when it goes to the, because now you're gonna go to the county commissioners and be, yeah, what were these guys thinking?
Well, I still like what we were thinking, and I still appreciate citizen input to cut across you, I'm sorry about that. But I do feel like your citizen input is valuable at each moment, and if I can give an analogy, that first time the airplane's wheels hit the tarmac is sort of us, and the true meeting of the road is the BOCC, so we're the first time the rubber starts to meet the road, and then it really has a true bite when it comes to them ratifying the decision that we help them make by giving them our recommendation. So again, it's your citizen input is valuable at most phases. My opinion is it's more valuable earlier, because it's easier for all the folks to get on board. And again, planning is about steering corrections. It's not about paradigm shifts completely. It's about steering corrections here and there, and then we get towards the correct area we're trying to get to. So
Right.
Early is better.
I had to get to the point in my mind, because this is a compromise. I don't think heavy commercial, light industrial should be in mixed-use suburban by definition of it. But if you can have the same uses, that should be allowed. That's a workaround. The county doesn't have to go back to HCLI people and say, you have to rezone. I understand all that. That's the reality of, political stuff. So
Can I make a compliment? That took me like 3 years working as a professional planner to figure out, because the compromise is a great way to land where it took me literally 3 or 4 years to figure that out.
Yeah.
And it was a bloody 2 or 3 years for some communities in the family, I'll tell you that.
It is
But I'm
difficult.
happy that you're there. That's a
Yeah,
very
it is
good thing.
difficult, and also, I am working on a couple different issues, and so I'm sorry when I come up here, sometimes I am disorganized, I'm trying to present better so it's more understandable, giving you guys things ahead of time so you can look at it, so it's just the nature of, my life right
Everything
now.
I think you presented has been pretty thorough. Now, sometimes thorough beyond my ability to comprehend in the, 10 minutes that we're doing it. So earlier is better, and we appreciate your input very much, because obviously a lot of thought was put into it, and that's a lot more than 99% of the community, unfortunately.
Thank you, appreciate it. And one more comment. I thought Commissioner Robinson didn't send this back to you because he did not like the residential uses. That was my interpretation when I watched the meeting, so a little bit different.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Blackwell?
That's a good, intro for me.
I did go to the BCC meeting and I woke up that morning and I was telling my husband, well, I got them to give a 10-foot setback to the cargo container in a residential neighborhood, so that's pretty good. And he looked at me and says, well, they just shouldn't be there at all. And I thought about it and I said, well, you're right. We don't need shipping containers sticking up behind fences 2.5 feet. So that made me think we need to look a little more critically at what is given to us. Just because something is in writing doesn't mean that it is the best route. So I spoke to the commission that night. I said I didn't think they were compatible with residential neighborhoods. And then Mr. Jones supported that. He said, staff has said that they have serious reservations about cargo containers in residential neighborhoods. So it was a 1-2 punch pretty much. And Mr. Robinson, right off, I don't think they should be in residential neighborhoods, and off to the races. And another commissioner supported that. And they said, well, and I said we should send it back to the planning board and get those uses taken out. And so that's what they did. They sent it back to you to change that. So I thought it was a nice, example of democracy in action. I was very pleased with the whole thing. But it was clear to me that it came back to you because of having those in the residential uses, and they didn't want it. And someone said, well, we should just do that in the platted subdivisions. And I said, no, where does that idea come from? I hate that. Just because I live in a house that is in a lot next to another lot, we are also a neighborhood. It's not just the people in a platted subdivision who care what their neighborhood looks like. So, so that's what I wanted to say to you today. And I've had meetings, and there's a lot going on OLF8 behind the scenes that I'm trying to get behind and anticipate and drive in a certain direction. So I haven't even had a chance to look at the ordinance as it is. So I don't know, Griffin, what it ended up saying.
What we've gone back and forth, and what Griff has brought for us was the document today. We bantered 4 months back and forth. It was sent back to us with little or no direction. You've given us more direction than was directed by the Board of County Commissioners, quite frankly. So it was frustrating. We're having the same arguments. We probably spent an hour going over retreaded ground. What we've asked is send it back to, right now, Griff and Horace are going to figure out how we send it back to the Committee of the Whole and take the document as it is and ask them, does this hold any merit whatsoever? Should it be pursued to forge the document in the best way possible and allow the county commissioners time to digest the document as opposed to just at a meeting?
Right.
Or do we make everything fall under storage, under the current codes that we have on whatever your zoning is? It would, just because it's a storage, a shipping container, it is being utilized as storage, it would have to fall under the requirements for storage, whatever that means. So we're basically asking them, what do you want us to do with this? This is the document we have as today, given the one where it was taken out of residential. Those designations are removed from it. Do you want, this being the starting point, is it worth the time for us to go through and argue this out, forge it into something manageable for the county commissioners to look at and for final completion, or not? Or do we just keep it a status quo, quite frankly? That's our ask. Otherwise, we will probably have this discussion in every board meeting for the next year.
Okay, so there are other things to think about. I did go and talk to someone another city on it, and what they do is they don't allow shipping containers out at all, residential or anywhere, unless you turn them basically into buildings. You put a roof on them you make them look like buildings. So anyway, that's another thing to think about that could be done, and I gave that to Griff or somebody. She had diagrams of what they suggested, it actually had their ordinance. So, that's something else to look at. So.
Mr. Chair, if I may, could we have the video of that section of the meeting at the BOCC sent to our board in the next few days, just so we have some clarity as to what actually transpired versus just accounts of my take on it, your take on it? Can we have that video that's sent to us, please? Okay, and then just to re-solidify what I said to Jamie earlier was when you folks give us comments, that earlier is always the better. In this instance, every time you've been at these meetings for the last 4 months, you're giving us comments so that we can affect change before it's not necessarily too late, but before it's, after the fact. And every time you guys do that, it is most appreciated here, because we're getting very minimal citizen input and we're just being able to use our thinking caps here. So it's, again, I'm just sending my praise back towards you guys in the audience there. Thank you.
Right, well, I would have thought that would have been clearly portrayed to you.
In our defense on this draft was relatively late in coming. I mean, we were still beating on it for a while, so she would not have had it until you had it. And that doesn't give her a lot of time to comment on it.
I'm worried about LFA right now. But cargo containers are important too. We don't need them sticking up over our fences all through the neighborhoods.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, thank you.
Yes, sir. Last call.
Just wanted, Danny Rainey, 625 Bremen, touch on the point about the construction of them. You'd mentioned making them conform to storage sheds. Well, the shipping containers are made out of Corten steel, so they're a lot more durable and probably withstand more elements than a storage shed would. The other thing is, if you're in a neighborhood, you want it in your backyard as a shed, if you have an HOA, you can start an HOA, but if it's your own private property, I believe you should have them.
Thank you, sir.
You did fill out a speaker
Yeah,
form?
do one more. Did you guys do one more? For each item?
He said the same thing, just as long as he has a
We've been on
record.
this item that long, oh my gosh.
Yes. No, just so we have it, and you can let the board have it. Very good, public forum, nothing else, we'll go to director's review. Director is absent here, so that's a pretty quick review. County attorney's report,
I have nothing, thank you.
future meeting, July 3rd, really?
Yes, I had emailed
Yeah.
everyone a while back about changing the July meeting, so I just wanted to reiterate, if y'all aren't gonna be able to be there on the 3rd, let me know.
I hope I'm not, quite honest.
I mean, if everybody wants to just go ahead and change it, we can move it to the next
We'll
week.
change it to 10.
Yeah. That I will need to check.
We'll give it a whirl if it doesn't.
So, but you think it would be best to go ahead and change it to the next week? Okay.
So the
All right.
14th, Flag Day, is that what we're talking about?
The 10th.
July 10th.
Oh, I'm sorry, in June, you guys, I'm so sorry.
And I will double check the room, make sure
Make
it's
sure it's
available, and
available.
then I'll re-email y'all just to clarify that it is changed to now July 10th.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other announcements?
I have an item.
How about it?
Okay, I would like to gain support from my fellow members of the board to introduce the ability for our staff to come back to us next month or the month after with, basically, this would be an adoption by, what's the word? Basically, what it would be is last year, the DOT finally adopted Complete Streets Ordinance, and basically a Complete Streets policy at the state level, DOT did, and that basically regulates what happens in all state facilities, and it was a brilliant move. It was so big, we even had like special meetings at the Panhandle about debuting it, and DOT's movement to that line of thought was a very, very progressive, very, very good, very small scale, small grain up to the high scale or large scale. And what I would like to do is to be able to to introduce an ability for us to actually adopt that policy as a county policy as well. And it's not something this is not the first county to do it. I would like staff to be able to bring to us a type of ordinance that could then basically copy and mimic the different transects, recognize transects, and recognize that there was a change in basically the design manual, which would, it's very detailed. That's why I kind of want the staff to come bring it to us. But I would like to advocate that we could have that ability to take a look at that, but then have the BOCC consider it. But complete streets policies are basically allowing people to age in their house and allows them to have from the age 8 to the age 80, a safe realm with which to operate any vehicle, even their feet. Their bicycle, their baby carriage, their car, their motorcycle, anything's done safely. And the idea of a complete street even includes transit as well, or alternative vehicles.
This was done with DOT?
DOT actually took several years to do this, but they changed their design manual, the Green Book, and they changed their complete street policy. I will tell you a quick anecdote where this gave us trouble. We were trying to do some changes on Main Street, and for sections of the median, we weren't allowed to put trees in because DOT was considering it as the same facility as a 0 to 30, as a 0 to 60 facility, and you can't have trees very close to the roadway when the speeds are up to 60 miles an hour. They present a hazard. It's a backwards way of thinking, truthfully, but the fun thing is we missed the opportunity to put more trees on that beautiful thoroughfare that we could have had more trees on it. So now that the manual has changed, they consider the roads as different types of roads, different types of facilities have different setback requirements and allowance for more trees on parkways and roadways. So it was a really neat breach from the norm, which is, guys, it's not in our design manual, sorry, you can't do it. Even if it's in your jurisdiction, the city can't do this or the county can't do that. So it was really neat. That was the one anecdote where we could have gotten even more trees on Main Street if we were allowed to put them just a little bit closer to the roadway, which would actually slow the vehicles and make them safer for anyone and all of us. So anyways, the idea was, and I've even spoke with Mr. Jones about it, was I'd like for the staff to be able to bring an idea back where we could adopt by reference was the term I was unable to use a minute ago. Adopt by reference, which would mean we'd have to include the manual in our appendix on the comp plan, but that's done electronically these days. It's really no big deal. But that would be the idea to incorporate these brilliant moves on DOT's part locally.
All right, I'm kind of familiar with the complete streets there, there's a couple things. One, the sector plan pretty much already has that kind of adopted scenario that you were just talking about in the sector plan, which is the northwest part of the county. Second, just a question, because I'm not 100% familiar, would be, since this was DOT, it's just referring to just state roads.
Yeah, that's going to be the part where we're going to have to ask you to craft, craft some way to then discuss our own county roads in the same manner. In other words, we're going to have to figure out the parallel classification, road classification.
So this would be, I think we would need to take a step back. One, include transportation like David Forte and Colby into this. And second, it sounds more like a design manual, which goes through the PAC before it comes to here. So yes, we have to go to the PAC first, let them try to work out those issues, then bring a recommendation up to the planning board and move forward that way.
This is precisely what I was thinking. There's two elements, you're seeing them exactly they are. Basically classification of roads, and basically how do we translate their classifications to our road classifications. That's Al and David all over the place, as well as the design comes out of the Green Book. And that's some interesting, it's gonna take some work. And it's not going to be a simple, like Mr. Downs might want, a very simple verbiage to do this.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to, as a PAC member, I'd be happy to bring it to discussion. Maybe we can put that on the agenda for them.
The fun thing is we're already figuring out how to do this. We have a consultant hired, DPZ, Duane's Planners Zyback in downtown. They're doing the CRA master planning again downtown, and they are recommending the same exact ordinance be done in the same language being translated into the city. So the fun thing is that we might be able to work in partnership with our folks at the city and figure out a way to do this together so the Escambia County's entirety of the jurisdiction is in cahoots with the same document that's coming out of DOT, which is, that's what I was gonna also tell you, is we're already figuring out how to do this. This is one of the chief recommendations that Rick Hall is making for our downtown CRAs and for our city jurisdiction as a whole, so. It's just,
it sounds far too logical. It really sounds logical.
Same sheet of music, right?
don't know if we're allowed to do that. Yeah,
You're right, I take it back.
sounds good.
No, no kidding, and again, I don't know if I need your support tonight, or today rather, now it's getting late, for us to be able to do this, but if we need that, I mean, I would like to hear if we could get a recommendation to ask staff to work with something along the lines of what I just mentioned today.
I'm all for it. I don't know that we need anything in the form of an amendment or anything, but I would certainly suggest it's a great idea to send towards back. If it makes it back to us, that's when we'll come to a thumbs up, thumbs down when we start working on it.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you,
give
Mr.
you a
Chairman.
follow-up and we'll, try to put it on the agenda for discussion with the PAC meeting.
Very good. Hearing nothing else, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Free on Friday.
Sure, I'll come around.
No, I didn't.
I'm like, who's this idea with the?
Well, wait, there's the other, take care, revisions of the, Mr. Davis, I think, go over to decide that we work with the programs.
Probably not gonna video this meeting, had a lot of technical difficulties.
A video of today?
There won't be? Luckily, we've got it down, recorded the whole thing.
Right.
Do you have audio though? Do you have the audio?
No, that's what went out. I have the video, I don't have the audio.
Oh, Shiza.
Just as well.
Probably
Maybe
myself,
a
and try
lip
to.
reader, I
Make sure we
Yeah,
acknowledge it.
so
Oh, no.
you won't have a copy of this meeting.
Well, I guess tell Joyce Sabuka and
Oh, I've already told her.
IT, okay.
I'm IT.
He is.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if we can
No, that's not it.
I'm Robert, I'm the one that sits back here recording.
Oh, wait,
Thanks, guys.
Or Mr. Mayor.
Oh, so I heard him say that, I just wanna let
Yeah,
you
how do we
know.
get more people to do that?
We have a lot of.
He is a great guy. He used to live,
Okay,
I mean, it is what it is.
do you have a backup? Do you have a backup?
No.
Is that his?
Reminded them, I said, hey, we're gonna get your camera, and went over there.
Right.
We've had it with the old system, there were times where it did.
So we could probably do the backup of an audio recording if you want to start doing that.
Oh,
And yours is on the
Craig,
other.
you didn't, because the IT guy just,
Trying to get a CO.
Did you record the whole meeting? Because the IT guy said
Yeah.
he just said he was having technical problems, and he didn't think there was good video, or good audio.
Three sticks.
the stand.